One of the big problems that many people have in their pastures are a lot of weeds. And so in order to be able to effectively control weeds, there's a couple of things you have to do. And one of the first things is you have to be able to understand that there's not just one time a year that you can spray and control all the weeds in your pastures. Usually we have two crops of weeds growing in our pastures every year. And so let me show some slides here that's going to help be able to kind of illustrate that. Okay, and so when we start talking about weeds, we have both cool season weeds and warm season weeds growing in our pastures each year. So cool season weeds, we're talking about things like, buttercup, thistles, buckhorn, broadleaf plantain, those kind of things. Warm season weeds are going to be things like horse nettle, spiny pigweed or spiny amaranth, ragweed, those kind of things. And so in order to be able to effectively control those weeds, you have to understand their life cycles because it'll help you understand when to be able to spray. So let's talk first about cool season weeds. Again, buttercup, thistles, those kind of things. What's going to happen is those plants begin to germinate and grow in the fall, kind of in that September period. When the temperatures cool down, we start to get some rainfall, those weeds begin to germinate and grow, and they start to do that in that September, October, November period. And then usually when we get into November to early December, we've gotten cold enough temperatures that most of our germination is over with at that point, and then those plants are just going to be out there growing flat on the ground. So if you look across the pasture, you may not notice them, but if you walk into a pasture and look down, you'll see those weeds usually just kind of flat on the ground. So they're going to grow like that until kind of the late March, maybe early April period. And then what's going to happen is at that point, those weeds are going to begin to produce blooms. And so that's when all the pastures, turn yellow with buttercup and all. And these plants then are going to bloom until the late May, maybe the early June period. And then if they're an annual, they're going to die. If they're perennial, they're going to go dormant. And then they wait for September, and then the process starts all over again. So if you want to be able to effectively control these weeds, understanding this life cycle is a big help, because if you're going to use a herbicide to try to kill them, okay, you don't want to spray back here when you're still in that germination period, because at that point, you may kill everything that is germinated up till the day you spray, but you still have the potential of getting germination after that. At the same time, you also don't want to spray after the plants begin to bloom, because the way that most of these broadleaf herbicides work is they're basically a hormone, and they are stimulating the plant to grow extremely rapidly. The cells are beginning to divide extremely rapidly, and the plant basically grows itself to death. Well, if you're going to try to grow a plant to death, you need the plant to be actively growing. And when a plant has begun to bloom, it's not actively growing anymore, it's trying to produce seed. So if you spray a herbicide after plants begin to bloom, what's going to happen is your control is going to go really way down. So your window to try to control these cool season weeds is going to be this December through the March window. That's when you're going to try to do it. What you need is 3 days where your high temperature gets to about 60 degrees. And after those 3 days, it's going to stimulate those weeds to grow enough so that when you apply the herbicide, it'll take the herbicide in and you'll control the plant. So December through March with 3 days of high 60-degree temperatures. So most of the time, people think about trying to control weeds in the March period, but I think one of the windows we really need to be looking for is that December window. A lot of times the ground is firmer because it's not as muddy. And we can get those weeds controlled. Just watch for those temperatures. Now that's cool season weeds. I just look here at warm season weeds, and actually the principles are exactly the same. Okay, it's just the time of the year that happens. So that now these weeds are going to begin to germinate and grow kind of in that April, May, kind of early June window. And then they're going to have a period where they're just going to be vegetatively growing. And then very quickly, starting sometime probably in that mid-June, July period, they're going to begin to produce blooms. And they'll do that into, October or so. And then usually we get enough frosts that if they're annuals, those plants are going to die. If they're perennials, they go dormant, and then they wait till the next April, and the process starts all over again. So really, the same principle is with cool season weeds. You're looking for this window of when they're just vegetatively growing. That's when you want to apply the herbicide. Now, one of the things I've tried to draw here is to show you that the window to control warm season weeds is a lot of times much shorter than what you have for the cool season weeds, because they tend to go reproductive and produce blooms very quickly. So you need to be able to really be ready for that. If something happens and you tend to miss that window, you can extend it a little bit by coming in maybe during this period and mow those weeds and force them back into vegetative growth, and you can spray and control them. You can't wait until September to do that, but if you miss it by a couple of weeks, you can extend that window a little bit. Now, one of the things that's different about some of our warm season weeds compared to cool season weeds is actually we can get germination on some of our warm season weeds really almost the entire summer. So a good example of that is spiny amaranth or spiny pigweed. A lot of time it comes up in areas where we fed hay during the wintertime, or areas that have a lot of hoof traffic. And so a lot of times, you can get a lot of germination early, and if you spray and control those, you'll kill them. But then the next time you get a rain, you can get more germination of those weeds because you'll just have a huge amount of seed in that seed bank. So sometimes you may actually have to spray twice for some of these weeds during the summertime. But the principle is look for that period after germination, but before they start to bloom. That's your window to be able to control. So when it comes time to control weeds, you have to understand those life cycles. If you need to try to get specific recommendations on herbicides for specific weeds, one of the best things you can do is go to our website, utbeef.com, and under the Forages tab, you'll see a weed control section. There you can find our weed control manual, and you can see all the different herbicide recommendations and which weeds they control, and be able to do an effective job on your weed control program.